Parsons Palmer space, second space at the LSPU hall. And I want to say a warm welcome to everybody in the room and all of our online watchers and listeners and followers. We are so very, very grateful to have you all here this evening. So I'm going to just start the evening off by asking everybody in the room who has one of these guys in their pockets or purses or anywhere to please put it on silent or turn it off. Because lots of performers find, but in particular storytellers find, it's quite distracting if you get notifications or a call in the middle of a story. So if you could do us that courtesy, please, we really appreciate it. Thank you very much. And if you need to take a call, you can certainly just exit the room and go a little ways so we can't hear you. Welcome to the space on behalf of St. John's Storytelling. Tonight is a Homespun. That's our show tonight, Tales of Rural Newfoundland, which is a show we do every year. Just a few housekeeping items. Our emergency exits are through here and through here. We're not on an airplane. There is no pressurized cabin. No oxygen will drop. But you can go through this door or this door to get to the emergency exits. And washrooms are out here. And once you get in that little corridor there to your left, you will find bathrooms with stalls. And to your right, you will find bathrooms with urinals and stalls. So whichever you want to use is fine. As long as you wash your hands, that's important. No pass on that. I can't remember if I said I'm Karen Carroll, president of St. John's Storytelling or not, because I've said it so many times this week. I don't remember if I've said it or not. I might be saying it in my sleep. Hope I'm not. So I'm just going to introduce our host this evening, Randy Crane. So Randy is a very accomplished storyteller and actor. He is actually going to be doing a play based on the life of the infamous pirate, Peter Easton, at Princess Sheila Nagara Theatre on November the 1st. That's his latest acting venture, but he's been in many dinner theaters and different productions over the years. And he's also an editor and a writer, and he recently edited Michael Boyle's book on New Turf. So if you haven't seen that book, you should look it up. It's a really good book and a good read. So I'm going to ask Randy to come up to the stage now and get us started on our evening of storytelling, which is always a really good evening of storytelling.
Thank you, Karen, for going easy on me. Welcome, everybody, to the final show of the St. John's Storytelling Festival Week.
No, it's not. More afternoon, we got one else.
One evening. We got to listen carefully. Multiple events every day, and most of them were sold out. Like tonight is sold out. So thank you very much to all of you for that. And we couldn't have done all that without the support of the audience and the followers, and especially our sponsors, our funders, RSNL, BACHCEDP, City of St. John's, and the Canada Council for the Arts. And for our sponsors, PhoneMed and Perfect Day. And for our partners, of course, Cox and Palmer Second Space, the ship in through the St. John and the Newfoundland Labrador Folk Arts, the rooms, AC Hunter, and the Legacy out in Cubits, the Legacy Center in Cubits. All people who supported us and sponsored us and made all this possible. So thank you very much to all of them. So one of the pluses about attending a storytelling festival is chatting with all the people who are in various stages of development after storytelling and their performance. And there's a lot of newer people and people who don't get a chance to get up on stage very often. And I chatted with a few of them this week, and they told me that they got great support and encouragement from some of the senior tellers or tellers that had been on stage for a long while. And that's important. And it got me thinking that I did have a few people along the way who encouraged me. The very first time that I ever got up enough nerve to sing in public, I didn't think this one through. I did it at a company function in front of all the salesmen that I worked with. When I finished, one of the salesmen came up to me and he said, "You should go to Nashville." I mean, that's encouraging enough. He said, "The walk can do you good." And I did attempt to play the guitar. I do play the guitar, but not very well. I certainly wouldn't play it in public. But Jason Marks is an accomplished musician, accomplished teacher, with a not so accomplished student that he was trying to teach. So I was determined. So I said to Jason, I want to learn. I'm going to do my own song right from the start. I'm going to write the lyrics. I'm going to write the melody. You show me how to do the chord progressions. I'll sing it and I'll play it, and that'll be my song. So he did that over the next couple of sessions, and then he said to me, "Now, you go on, and you write the song, and you make two of us rich." So I went away and I wrote my song, came back, played for Jason. I said, "What do you think?" And he had his chin in his hand, and he said, "You're going to make me a rich man." I said, "Really?" I mean, I thought it was a good song, but I didn't think we were going to give up our day job for it. He said, "Yes, sir, you're going to make me a rich man." So we have 4 tellers performing here tonight, including myself. Anita Best was scheduled to attend. Anita could not attend, so we had to sell it for people here. And you could not get a more different group of 4 tellers if you tried. Everybody got a different style, and that's the magic of storytelling. The style and the storyteller is just as important as the story, and you find that out as the night goes on. So I'm going to introduce our first storyteller. Is Ken Parsons. I have to use this because Ken's got a long bio, as does everybody. Ken loves Newfoundland and Labrador, and it shows in his recitations. Spending his summers in Bonavista Vista Bay, he invented a community with heartwarming stories and all kinds of foolishness. They raised an Ireland, the fictional community of raising Ireland. Now, most people have a fictitious friend, or Ken had a whole community full. I don't know if he's got more problems than most of us. And he describes the everyday joys and fun of local culture, which are always just down the iron. He's an accomplished magician, and you may see Ken pull a trick or two out of his sleeve. And I'll give you a heads up, keep your hands on your wallet and your watches when there's a magician around. Ken Parsons.
Away. All good. Guys, let me see. A painter is a rope. It's tied to the shore in a boat, and it sort of keeps her from drifting away. This piece of twine tells the story about my Uncle Clinton's story and how she was almost lost at the bay. See, one time at low tide, where nothing can hide, he thought that painter looked splayed. He had to act quick. The boat started to drift, and she headed right up the bay. But, he caught her in time. The boat was just fine. It was lucky she didn't keep going. But it was only yesterday night. He had tied her up tight. It was 2 half turns, a reef knot, and bowling. But now his painter's in 2. And sure, what could he do? And it looked like it was headed for weather. So he took out a pin. And that's when he began really to stitch those 2 pieces together.
Hold your applause.
Well, that painter inspected, he thought he detected there was something that didn't look right. And it wasn't a mark or a pit, because that wasn't it. But that looks like a bite. Now the boat was tied off, so a goat's not the cause. It wasn't a dog up on shore. It was some creature, I feel, like a crab or an eel. And if that's the case, buddy, it's war. See, way before they last found them, there lived on the bottom a creature that circled the Clem's keel. But it wasn't a lobster or a squid that did what they did. It was the meanest and toughest of eels. See, eels with attitude, they're exceptionally rude. They're not often in Raising Arms Bottom, but it was sadly to say, it was looking that way Raising Arms Harborers got them. So my uncle said that was that. He set a trap. He said, this wrongdoer has done his last wrong. He was snared in a second, and boys, don't you reckon? Clem looked, and there he was, gone. He said, before my next meal, I'll catch that old eel and I'll bottle him and put him up on a shelf. Oh, Clem hooked him, he figured, but that little jigger was as slippery as, well, as himself. That eel couldn't be snared as what my Uncle Clem feared, like he was some kind of magical genie, because quick as a wink, he'd be back in the drink like some slippery saltwater Houdini. My uncle's patience wore thin. He didn't know if he'd win and drive that old eel from the coast. So he took a long pause. Just to ponder the cause and how to make that old eel just a ghost. See, my uncle's not a complainer, but he said, why is he after my painter? What brought this devil to my door? But then he figured it out. Boys, he had neither doubt. This Sleeveen will Sleeveen no more. The secret, you see, that eel was a she. And with the water being so grubby, oh, she took quite a shine to Clem's piece of twine. Because she thought that painter was hubby. So quick as a snap, Clem checked all his traps and found one obviously affectionate male. Brought him straight to the pier, and boys, who was there? That she-eel just wagging her tail. So that's the end of my story about Clem's painter and Dory, and well, how he saved that eel marriage from pieces. And for my Uncle Clem and his wife, it was the pride of their life. There are 500 nephews and nieces. True story. My favorite story, and I'll share this one and we'll do another fun one after that in the second half. But, well, let's just get into it. Newfoundland and Labrador are those kind of places where people come to escape and give up their races. But not long ago now, we did have one spot where no one escaped nothing, and a battle was fought. See, in the small town of Raising Arm, when provisions are scanty, nobody's allowed in the landlord's pantry. Now the pantry is open, it's not locked anymore, but I'll tell you guys the story about what happened before. See, it was Nan's old orange tomcat. Now he's dearly departed, but that cat is the reason all these shenanigans started. It's just around the bay, tomcat, sure every bay got the same. Nan loved her old cat, but never gave her a name. The cat just did what he wanted. He came in and went out and was, the kind of the cat that's got the run of the house. Now, we're not talking about some spry creature with some, like some fit mountain climber. No, he was more like a potato on a sofa recliner. And he's not a fast feline who can slither and slinker. This is the kind of a cat that's a sitter and thinker. And Nan kept the cat food, up high on a shelf, and there was no way that cat could get it himself. But one afternoon, he just wanted a snack, and it was just purity products on that lower rack. Well, sir, He ate a whole bag, or was it two of hard bread? And, ooh, that's when he got that purity taste in his head. So from that day on forward, sure, if that cat's heart was beaten, it was only purity products was all he was eating. Nan would go for crackers, you know, for when company comes, and she'd go into the pantry and nope, not a one. And sure, she couldn't make any of her own fish and brews because there was not a bit of hard bread around for to use. So as stuff started to vanish, ooh, Nan got right vicious. First her hard bread and her cookies, and then her own candy kisses. So Nan had enough. She put on a bolt and a lock. But a roundabout tomcat is not easily stopped. The very next day, that old cat, he gained entry, and he's Houdini'd his way into Nan Blunden's pantry. And to make matters worse, just to be a tormentor, he would chew all the jams and lick the jam from the centers. So then Nan turned that pantry into an impenetrable vault. She made sure that cat's antics would be brought to a halt. She installed like bolts and big chains from ceiling to floor, and if you look down, you could just make out. She built a secret trap door, and there was a dirty big padlock. And boys, if you don't know the code, well, the Bombay door's open and down you go. See, to protect her provisions, she'd take on any man. Those television ninjas, they got nothing on Nan. It's like Mission Impossible, but for crackers. That's the description I'd use, but boys, we're not talking about some fit feline Tom Cruise. No, that cat just sat bawling, and boys, it was some sin. It was the non-stop meowing because he couldn't break in. Nan, oh, poor Nan was drove, and she let out a roar, and that cat shuddered and shook and fell dead to the floor. I wish you were gone, but she didn't mean that, and it wasn't her plan to make away with the cat. The old cat was dead. He had died from the fright. Nan felt that bad. She took all the locks off that night. See, because the vault that she created around all of her food had killed her poor cat, and it ruined her mood. She went to bed early, her cheeks were all wet, and she cried through the night over the loss of that pet. And the very next day, well, something looked odd. It kind of looked like the pantry door was abroad. Yes, so it was. Sure, Nan had been robbed. The shelves were bare empty. Who would do such a job? They ate every cracker, every cookie and crumb. Actually, chewed every candy with the butter and rum. They drank all the syrup. They ate all the jam. Now, who down the arm would do this to poor Nan? Was there someone that vicious that would sneak in and pray and go take advantage of a poor grieving old maid? Well, Nan was in shock. Sure, what now could she eat? But, boys, who was that on the daybed, covered in crumbs, half asleep? Who knows? It was Nan's old orange tomcat. He was alive. See, to get into the pantry, he faked his demise. Nan wasn't angry. She was one happy missus. She didn't care if the cat ate the cream crackers or kisses. She was just glad now to see her old friend. And those purity biscuits, boys, she could get more again. But boys, what a story. The local newspaper read, "Raised an iron tomcat, fakes being dead." And out in purity factories, the boss, Mr. Pratt, he sent out a truck full of goodies when he heard all about that. Man was very pleased. And with the cat's recent fame, she decided, boys, it's time I give that old cat a name. So she christened him Nobody. Not because affections are scanty, but because, well, now nobody's allowed in Nan Blunden's pantry. True story.
Thank you, Ken. Great story. Janine Walsh is the next presenter. And the very first time that I saw Janine or heard Janine tell a story, it might have been the first story she told here at the St. John's Storytelling. I didn't know if it was true or not. She did such a great job of the story, and I wouldn't ask her. I didn't want to know, really. Janine is a storyteller, photographer, and avid woodcarver. She writes and performs her own original poetry and stories, and as an accomplished photographer, has taken a unique approach to storytelling by often performing with the photographs featured in her stories. She's a regular presenter and mentor with Land and Sea, that's SEE, an international photography conference held in Prince Edward Island. She's a published editor, helping others craft their stories. Her original poetry has been published in anthology with Canadian spoken word poet Shane Kosigan. She collaborated on writing fiction storybooks by acclaimed artist Joe Robinson, performed original works of storytelling as concert show openers for Lenny Gallant and Dana Manning. And she is a frequent performer in the St. John's Storytelling circles, workshops, festivals, and other events throughout the province. Her love of woodworking and storytelling has recently led her to finishing a 4-year master's program in puppetry arts, and her most recent puppet is an uber marionette named Fran. Janine.
Well, thank you, Randy, for that. And yes, being here on the board, enjoying this week with you all for storytelling. It began way back many years ago when Gary Green, one of our best, put off a workshop for storytelling, just like he's going to do starting Monday this week. And from that, like many more that were here, I never left. It fostered that thing in me that gave me the ability and the outlet to tell stories in public and with all of you. In early days, I can remember being at one of our events, and we had our friend Chris Brooks be the host, and everyone was putting up their name to tell on the stage. And I had this one story that I was really hovering on for 2 or 3 years. Every time, like the right time of the year came up, I didn't put it up. And I went up to him and I told him that, and he said, very straight out, well, if not now, when? And he walked away. Well, I thought I lost my chance. Got up the nerve and went back to him. And I said, Chris, can you put my name on the list? He said, it's already there. Told a story that night and told it since. And many years later, now I'm here with you and I appreciate it. And part of what I do, being a photographer, is tell at sometimes a story related to a photo. Being a Newfoundland photographer and you travel all the communities, you get to see so much and hear from so many people. And what I love just as much as taking photos of wildlife and nature is stopping to the sheds and the locations and the little nooks and crannies and having a chat and getting some stories. And for me, that really solidifies my photography because it goes with the stories. So writing my own work, sometimes I'll have a vision in mind. And I'm using this photo here this evening. It's one that I took out in central Newfoundland a few years back. And sometimes a photo can stir something in you. It can bring together things from your past, things from other people's past, stories that may be buried, may not be spoke of. And sometimes it's okay to speak of those stories. This is one such story. The photo is called The Old Man in the Boat. Now, I was on the road. I headed out towards central Newfoundland, taking my photos as I go. But it came that time of the day. It was midday, the sun was high in the sky, and I was ready for lunch. I said, okay, first store I see on my way, I'm going to stop, take a break, and get a lunch. Sure enough, As I'm going, the ocean's on the right. There's a little store on the left. Perfect. I go into the store, get myself a sandwich and a snack, and I come out, sit by the ocean to have my lunch. Well, that's perfect. Perfect time of the day, the ocean and a lunch and all the sights to be seen. I took out my cameras, took some pictures as I do. I mean, the children were playing, the dogs were barking. There were boats and fishermen over by the wharf on the other side, and they were cleaning their catch. And the seagulls, they were just making a racket. They were gobbling up the bycatch. Well, I took some photos, and then I figured, okay, it's time to go. But then as I looked over in the distance, it was hard to see because the sun was so sharp. Would that be a good photo? Would it not? But I took it anyway. And it was a man getting ready to put his boat underwater. I knew it was a long distance. It wasn't going to be a great photo, but it would tell the story of the place. I took the photo, packed up, and headed out. Now I thought, when I get to the end of the causeway, on the other side of where that photo would have been, I'll stop and maybe get a better photo. Got to the end of the causeway, looked back, I didn't see it. I said, okay, he's gone, I didn't get the photo, but I'll take from what I got, and I went on my journey. Now, I was on the road for a couple of weeks, stopping here and there. But when I went back to the hotel, this photo was the one that really plagued on my mind, even though I had taken so many nice ones before. And I thought, okay, I'm going to bring up my computer, have a look at that photo. I had taken several, trying to get a good angle. To my surprise, only one photo in the whole lot of this came out. It wasn't great. I had to do some work to crop it in, to improve it so it could be, just presentable enough. I wasn't looking for something for the wall. I was looking for a story in a moment. And I was satisfied with it. Put it away. Well, it still plagued me. That photo, more than others, kept coming back to my mind. So I sat down one night and I wrote a poem, as I do sometimes, related to this story, to be the story for this photo. Well, that was fine. My vacation was coming to an end. I was heading back. Now, I thought, okay, I'm going back the same route. I'm going to stop in that same town, see if I can find this gentleman, some of the family, and get some of the backstory. That would make for a great fuller package of my story. So I did. Went back. First place I went was the store. They're going to know them. Store people know everybody. I went in, talked to the ladies that were there. No, they didn't know. But they told me, okay, I can tell you where to go. Try two places. Down over there by the Tiddly Wharf. Now the Tiddly Wharf was a small wharf where the boards were close together. And this worked out really well because the kids could play tiddly without losing their pieces through the cracks. Now the other place was down over the hill, 2 fence posts to the right, the shed. The guys would be there, surely they would know. And so I headed off, down to the Tiddly Wharf. There were fishermen there were kids there playing. No one recognized the gentleman in the photo. So, okay, fair enough. Off I go to the second location, down over the hill, 2 fence posts to the right. And sure enough, there was the shed with fine gentlemen hanging out in a sunny, hot afternoon. Showed them the photo on my computer, and they said, I don't really recognize him. I don't think. I said, okay, fair enough. Off I go again. Now, I can't spend too much more time, but as I'm going, I see this really old house up on the hill. And I'm thinking, okay, really old house, maybe this would fit better with the age of the man, and maybe someone in that age group would know. It was a beautiful green house, white shutters. I went up towards the house. There was fish drying on skeins outside. It was summer, but the stove was in. You could smell the smoke coming through, as old houses and people like to do. I knock on the door. Middle-aged man comes to the door. I told him what I was there for and explained my plight, that I was on a mission to find the family of this photo. Took out my computer, showed him the photo, and he looked at me kind of strange. He said, "Where did you get that photo?" I told him I had taken it a few weeks ago and I wanted to find the family. He welcomed me in. And when he did, he said, "That's my dad. And over there, that's my mother." Well, I was delighted. I made the connection. I look over, and she's an elderly woman sat in a rocking chair. And she doesn't even really look to me. She just stays in her rocking chair, constantly rocking, the whole time, just rocking. Looking out through the window, and the heat from that stove beaming through that room. I go over to her and I say hello and tell her a little bit about why I'm there and take out my computer and show her the photo. With that, she gasped. And she said, "That's my Henry, doing what he loves." And then she started to cry and she got back in her rocking chair and started to rock. Well, I didn't know what I had stirred up. I looked at the gentleman and I apologized and I went to go. He followed me out in the yard. And I said, "I'm so sorry for upsetting your mom. But obviously something has happened. And can you tell me what it is and why she's so upset?" And he began to tell me. His father went out on the sea and never came back. Now, he was an avid fisherman. And he loved the ocean. And he loved his boat. And people told him that he shouldn't fish anymore. And his boat was not in good repair. And he should not be on the ocean. But he didn't listen. He continued to go out and do what he loved and fished until the day he didn't come back. Well, he's crying, I'm crying. And I look at him and I say, "I'm so sorry about the recent passing of your father. I even wrote a poem for this picture." And he said, "Do you mind reading that poem to me?" With everything I could muster, I took the poem out of my pocket and took it out and I said, "Well, sure." It was titled "Old, Me and My Boat." My boat is old and failing like me. It sits on shore and looks out to sea. It's lived quite a life with stories to tell. Through thick and thin, it served me well. Some say that we should settle on shore, but death to a fisherman is to fish no more. If I help you and you help me, together again on the water we'll be. Well, I looked at the sun, and no words were necessary. And I headed out, and I told him I was sending that photo. He said, "Thank you so much." And off I did. But later, I found out that the date on the photograph was the 5th anniversary of the man's disappearance. And as the news spread through the town, it was said, that old man and his old boat that sailed away to heaven, they came back to his wife that day when that lady with the camera came to town. And his son contacted me and said, "Thank you." I said, "My goodness, I've upset you." "No," he said, "thank you." He said, "My mom no longer goes to the window and rocks in the chair. She knows her Henry is okay." Thank you.
Wow.
Can you leave the easel there, please? Thank you. No, not the picture. The picture's great, but I need just the easel. I'm running Christmas here. Sorry, Randy.
No problem. Christine Hennebury is our next presenter. Christine's first storytelling experience was almost 50 years ago when her 4-year-old self tried to convince her parents that even though the couch was wet, she hadn't actually knocked over the bottle of bubbles. Instead, she was the innocent victim of a mysterious circumstance. Water had somehow just started pouring out of her nose. Let's just say that was that performance didn't go well. Hopefully tonight will better than that.
I live in hope.
Now that she's had more practice, Christine is a regular teller at events with St. John's Storytelling Festival, the Association for Arts in Mount Pearl, and other community groups. She's a featured teller at the inaugural Rocky Harbour Storytelling Festival in 2023, at the Stories Untold show hosted by the Lady Cove Choir in May of 24, and at Game On, a show hosted at the Rooms in August 2025. In the spring of 25, she partnered with Catherine Wright to present We All Belong Here, Storytelling and a Sense of Place, at 10 schools in the East Coast of Newfoundland, a project that was funded by Arts NL School Touring Program. Her first solo telling show, Stories Worn, debuted in September 2025 in Mount Pearl. She's the founder of the Association for Arts in Mount Pearl, the immediate past president of Storytellers Canada, and the past president of St. John's Storytelling Festival, and the proud recipient of the 2020 Impact in Music, Arts and Culture Award from the City of Mount Pearl. What a bio, Christine.
Hey, everyone. Thanks, Randy. So, it's a bit ironic coming up now, Janine. Anyhow, my dad, Peter Francis Edward Hennebury, the mostly civil engineer, passed away on May 6th, 2023. And there's been a lot of times since then that I've spoken to him. When I'm driving in my car by myself, I'm talking away to my dad sometimes on my back patio. For some reason, I feel like I can talk to him, but it's not very often I feel like he's there to talk back to me. But on October 31st, 2024, thanks to a tarot reading, my dad reached back from beyond the veil to give me a message. And it was annoying. My dad and I got along pretty well. I mean, for two quite stubborn people who like their own way. And, you know, for someone who's basically creativity in a dress and someone who was a mostly civil engineer. But one of the things, well, my dad and I really both like to read. We both like to play with words and see what else we could make them mean. And how else we could put them together weirdly. We liked a bad joke. I'll just tell you my dad's favorite joke right quick. There's a man walking down the road with a pig under his arm. And another fella comes up to him and said, "Where'd you get that ugly looking thing?" And the pig said, "I won him at a raffle." So you see the quality of the humor in my house. My mom has her eyes permanently rolled back into her head now. Anyhow, so one of the things that my dad enjoyed most in the world was giving me advice. And he didn't just like lay out the advice. It was in a pithy little statement. He sometimes it was great. Like he would, if I was heading off to something and I was a little worried about it, he'd say, "I got the highest kind of confidence in you, kid." You know, that's great. That's great. When I was heading off to grad school and I was a little bit concerned, he said, "You know, Chris, if you can't baffle them with brilliance, baffle them with bull crap." And I said, "Oh, that is good advice, Dad." And he said, "And it works the other way too, because they're trying to baffle you," which was even better advice. And, you know, sometimes he would encourage me with a uniquely Pete sort of statement by telling me I had more, well, let's say guts than most men. And I realized that, you know, what at first hit kind of weird, I realized, right, Dad graduated from university in engineering in 1974. He's doing his best. So then we got into the kind of realm where his advice would get annoying. Very, very annoying. Like, for example, he loved to tell me, "Chris, you can't be burning the candle at both ends." And, you know, again, good advice. But the problem with that was my dad's chronic inability to read the room, because it would be at a point where I'd already been burning the candle at both ends for quite some time. In fact, I had essentially what was a string with a little glob of wax left in the middle, and he's dropping this advice, like I can take action right then with that. I could not, of course. I was already at my wit's end. I had burnt the candle at both ends, and it was not helpful. And he would also love to tell me, Chris, you gotta learn to roll with the punches. And that was annoying on many levels. I mean, for starters, the man never rolled with a punch in his entire life. If something didn't go Pete's way, he was cranky for days. And also, I'm a trained martial artist. I have my 4th degree black belt in Taekwondo. I can evade a punch. I can block a punch. I sure as hell can throw a punch. But I have yet to learn to roll with them. And of course, he would bust this out at the time when, like, things were already bad. I was already feeling beaten down by the world. And he'd say, Chris, you gotta learn to roll with the punches. All I needed him to say was, gosh, that sucks. That's really hurt. Sorry that happened to you. And instead, he was busting out, roll with the punches, Chris. So that brings us to October 31st, 2024. Now, normally when I read tarot cards, I'm using them to structure my thinking, to figure out what I really know about things. I'm not usually reaching beyond the veil, but for some reason, on October 31st, when the veil was thin, and after I had taken care of the trick-or-treaters, I swear that doesn't mean I buried them in the yard. I just mean that I gave them candy. Even the real tall ones, full-size chocolate bars. That's a good house to trick-or-treat at my place. So I'm about to sit down and watch a slightly eerie movie with my husband. I said, you know what, I'm going to go up and do a tarot reading. And I decided to make a real ceremony of it. I light some candles, I think about my dad, and I lay out my silk handkerchief. This is not a table, but we're going to play. Pretend, all right? All right, and I pull up the 8 of Wands, the Tower, and the Knight of Wands. This is my advice that I have asked for from my dad from beyond the veil. And I look at this and I'm, okay, Dad, sure. What are you telling me here? Okay, so I've got 2 wands, 2 out of 3. Now this 3-card reading here, for me, I decided this was mind, body, and soul. So I've got 2 wands, 2 out of 3 are wands. And wands, that's the suit of fire. Okay, so what does this mean to me? Yes, I need to check on my fuel levels. I need to make sure I have enough for what I need to do. I need to be careful I'm not burning things too. I need to not burn the candle at both ends. Okay, Pete. So then I look at the individual cards. Okay, the 8 of Wands. 8 of Wands, that's great. Okay, so 8 of Wands, there's lots of stuff going on. It feels overwhelming, but that means that I have power I haven't tapped into yet. Oh, he's got the highest kind of confidence in his kid. That's great, thanks, Dad. Okay, and then I move on to the Tower. Now, the Tower can be kind of a grim card in some cases, but, you know, it's also a sign that there's a lot of change happening. Things are a big deal, and, you know, I mean, my dad had died the year before. There was a lot of change, and that was just one part of what was going on. So, okay, that makes sense. But then this particular card, all in black and white, I chose this particular deck because it has to do with books. It's based on the Night Circus by Aaron Morgenstern, and also because all the cards are black and white. Pete was a bit of a black and white thinker. Anyhow, so this particular card here, the Tower, it's a clock tower, and the face is coming off. You can see the gears in behind. So what people want you to see is the face, but you're seeing the gear. Okay, so I shouldn't be baffled by people's bullcrap. What they want to show me, I can see the gears in behind. I know what they're doing. Okay, that's good. That works for me. And then I look at the Knight of Wands. Now, all of the Knight cards are about taking action. There's someone diving into action. The time for thinking is past. Even though there are unsurmountable odds, it's time for you to face them down. It's time for you to do that. Take action. Okay, I can do that. And then I look particularly at the Knight of Wands. All the Knights are indicating that. The Knight of Wands. What does the Knight of Wands tell me? Well, the Knight of Wands is about facing that insurmountable force with ease and a relaxed attitude, and just, you know, coming at it without too much stress. Peter Francis Edward Hennebury, the mostly civil engineer. He had done it again. He had come from beyond the veil, so one more time he could tell me to roll with the damn punches. Thank you.
Many stories, you don't sort of write them as much as remember something and then put it together. And this is what happened with this story. But I was at it that long that I decided to call it, I don't know what I'm doing. I passed by the track and field complex in Mount Pearl a while back, and it reminded me that I had rented a room in there for my daughter's 13th birthday party. Now, I didn't usually get the job of booking birthday parties, so I must have done something particularly wrong that week. And when I told my buddies that I was organizing a party for the kids, they said to me, "What are you doing?" And I said, "I don't know, what am I doing?" "You're organizing the first mixed birthday party where the boys and the girls are together for the first time." Well, then I sort of had to think that I might not know what I'm doing. But the room was booked. So myself and Leah went over on Saturday afternoon, and just as we walked in, she said to me, "Dad, there's no stuff here." I said, "What kind of stuff? You don't need much stuff for pin the tail on the donkey." "No," she said, "the music and stuff. We're having a dance party." I said, No. There's no dances going on here this afternoon. And besides, I got no stuff." The lady in the office spoke up and said, "Don't you worry, my ducky. We got all the stuff you little darlings need for your dance party." My new best friend. So I spent the whole afternoon with my head on a swivel, like a sheepdog, trying to keep them separated. And I found myself wishing the old nun from my school days was there. At high school dances, she'd go around with a Bible under her arm, and she'd shove it in between you and the girls you were dancing with, to make sure there was no body parts. But she wasn't there, and I didn't know what I was doing. And then they started to pair up and go in behind cubby holes and out into other rooms. And I'd have to go out and get them and turn them in, and then I'd have to come back and do a head count to see how many more was missing. It was going to be a long afternoon. But about halfway through, I sort of got the feeling that I might be able to get through this day. The old sheep herder instincts were kicking in. When a little girl tugged on my arm and said, "Mr. Crane, there's a bunch of boys in the girls' bathroom." Now, I couldn't go into the girls' bathroom, so I said to her, "You go in, and you tell the boys Mr. Crane said, get out of the bathroom." You say it just like that. She went in the bathroom, and she never came out. Now, I couldn't send more girls into a bathroom full of boys when I was supposed to be keeping them apart. So I looked around for anybody or anything that could help me. And I spotted a microphone. And I flicked it, and it was live. And in my most strict parental voice, I said into the microphone, "Get out of the bathroom." The boys and the girls stopped dancing on the floor and looked at me. The lady in the office stopped what she was doing and looked at me. But nobody came out of the bathroom. So I ramped it up a bit. I bellowed into the microphone, "Get out of the bathroom now." Nobody moved. Except the lady in the office. She came running across the floor to me. She was going to save me. But she stopped halfway across and she said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "I don't know what I'm doing." She said, "That microphone is for outside on the track." Everybody in the neighborhood can hear what you're saying. So now, in addition to being stressed to the max and having responsibility for 20 hormone-infused preteens, I was visualizing this poor guy in the house closest to the track and field. And he'd been waiting all morning for his wife and kids to get out of the back. He'd been holding it in for hours. And finally, was empty. And the house was empty. And he's sitting there, hands down around his ankles, the weekend edition of the Evening Telegram in front of him. Total and absolute peace and quiet. Went into his personal space, comes his booming voice that says, "Get out of the bathroom." He doesn't know if he's hearing things, or if the house is on fire. And there's an urgency in my voice as I'm screaming, "Get out of the bathroom now!" He stands up, hands still around his ankles, because he doesn't want to give up he doesn't want to give up the peace and quiet that he's fought so hard for. But he knows he's got to go when the booming voice screams, "Leave the girls alone!" When I came back to my senses, the lady was taking the microphone from me, like she was talking me down off of the shelf. And she led me out to the patio, looking down over 3 or 4 houses right below us. And people were out on their patios with their head turned sideways, looking up at me. And this one particularly aggrieved looking fella screamed at me, "What are you doing?" I said, "I don't know what I'm doing." My daughter remembers nothing unusual about her 13th birthday. We are going to take a 15-minute break now. There's some snacks out here, purity snacks and white whatever. You can get tea or coffee at the bar. Thank you very much. Hope you enjoyed the first part of the show. We'll be back again at the same time in about 15 minutes. Thank you very much. Well, thank you very much for sticking around. We'll have the foretellers will do the story each now in the second half. Originally, storytelling in Newfoundland were stories that came over from Europe, from Ireland, England, other parts of the mainland Europe, and were told by, when Newfoundland settlers eventually started to stay over, would be told by Newfoundlanders, and they were mostly myths and fairy tales. And what they would do would be stay pretty true to the fairy tale, but put a Newfoundland twist to it to make it a true Newfoundland story. And when Memorial University did some research in the 60s or early 60s or 70s, I think, they found that the stories that were being told in Newfoundland, the fairy tales and the myths, were closer to the original than the same stories that were being told in Europe, where they had originated. Because of isolation, our stories didn't change. So your great-grandfather got the story, and he told his son, and he told his son, and it eventually came down to you, undiluted, basically. So I decided that I would write a fairy tale, and the Newfoundland twist that I wanted to put into it was the resettlement program of Joey Smollett in the 50s and 60s and early 70s, I guess. The story's made up, but the numbers that you're going to hear are the actual numbers from the resettlement program. So the dollars and the numbers of people are the numbers that were actually part of the resettlement program. Jack and the Three Giants. Long, long ago, and far, far away, well, not that long ago, 1950s, 1960s, not that far away, Placentia Bay, La Vista Bay, there was a boy named Jack. And he lived in the far reaches of the kingdom with his mother and father. And they lived in the house where Jack's father and his father before him and his father before him had lived. As a matter of fact, there was never a time when one of Jack's people didn't live in that house. And one thing was for sure, they weren't going anywhere. Like Jack's father was fond of saying, we got a roof over our heads, plenty to eat, and an outhouse only 100 feet from the front door. What more do you want? But one day, the king handed down a decree that all the subjects in the far reaches of his kingdom must uproot and move to a community closer to the king. Now the people thought this was a highly foolishness. And when nobody was around, they called the king by his nickname, Joey. But if anyone was there, they addressed him with his proper title, King Joseph of the Small Wood. Now this decree set off a row of Argan and John in the community, the likes of which had never been seen. The young people said, all we ever do is fish and grow vegetables and listen to the same old stories over and over again. And the old people said, we can fish and grow our own vegetables and listen to stories handed down from generation to generation. And so the arguments over resettlement in Newfoundland began. And these arguments went on for days and weeks and months until finally Jack spoke up. And that wasn't something you did back in those days without getting the wet face cut across the lips. But you see, Jack had heard about the money the king was offering. $300. And all you had to do was uproot your family, leave your life's work behind, tow your house and belongings out the bay and relocate to a community closer to the king. And they gave you $300. And that was more money than Jack and his family had ever seen. So one morning, Jack declared, I'm leaving. I'm going to go find my fame and fortune. Now, his father had to chuckle over that one. He doubted that Jack could find his way out of the community, let alone fame and fortune. He knew Jack wasn't the sharpest tool in the tool shed. He figured the last time Jack let his mind wander, it never came back. But he was their only child. If he was going, they were going too. So they started out early one morning. Now they weren't alone. 30,000 people from 300 communities left their homes that morning. Some towed their houses behind them. Some carried everything they had left in the world on their back. And Jack told them, no need to bring any food. I got a bow and arrow and I can shoot through the eye of the needle. Now his father had a chuckle over that one because he'd seen Jack trying to hunt rabbits. So he put 3 loaves of bread in the grub bag. He walked all day and coming on dark, they came to a fork in the road. They thought you could see the lights from the castle of the kingdom of the small wood down one path, and the other path led into the dark woods. Jack told his mother and father, go towards the light. Now they had to think about that one for a second. But they went towards the light, and Jack went into the dark woods. He hadn't gone very far when he realized he was hungry. He looked around, and his mother and father weren't anywhere to be seen. He whipped out the loaf of bread and wolfed it down. And it was the most delicious thing he'd ever eaten. And he started to feel funny in the head, even funnier than normal. And then he thought he heard voices. He looked down through the woods and he saw a huge castle. Now Jack had heard about such things as giants, but he only thought it was the old fellas trying to scare the young fellas and keep them out of the woods away from the rabbit snares. But here he was, looking in through the window at 3 giants sitting around a huge feast. Well, now how am I going to get out of this one? Thinks Jack. I've got to get past the castle to meet up with mother and father. Then he thought about his bow and arrow. Now he knew he couldn't kill the giant with the little arrows, but perhaps he could distract them long enough so he could scoot by the castle. So he loaded up an arrow and he fired off and he hit giant number 1, who stopped, looked at giant number 2, and said, if you do that again, I'll chop off your head. Jack fired another arrow, giant number 1, chopped off giant number 2's head. I wonder, will that work again, thinks Jack. He fired off another arrow, and sure enough, giant number 1 knocked off giant number 3's head. Only one giant left, thinks Jack. And he fires off an arrow without thinking. He hits giant number 1, and he stops and looks around. And Jack sees the error of his ways. Somebody's going to lose their head. They're not going to be giant number 1. Fee, fi, fo, fum. I smell the blood of an Englishman. Well now, thinks Jack, I might have dodged a bullet here. I don't have to run faster than the giant. I got to run faster than that Englishman the giant is talking about. No, he hasn't got it figured out in his head, but the giant reaches out and grabs him by the suspenders. He's just about ready to wolf Jack down, and Jack said, stop, buddy. I got a bow and arrow and I can shoot through the eye of an eagle. The giant stops in mid-gulp. He lays Jack down. Fee, fi, fo, fum. I've been trying to capture the princess of the castle of the small wood for years. But every time I break in, the cat starts to meow and wakes everybody up. You can kill the cat with your bow and arrow, and I'll capture the princess. We got a live one here, thinks Jack. He follows the giant to the castle. He looks in through the window, and sure enough, there's the cat sitting on the couch like he owned the place. Jack loads up an arrow, fires it off, misses the cat by a mile, knocks down a flower pot, and knocks out the cat. Jack jumps in through the window and passing by the cat. The cat opens one eye and looks at Jack as if to say, you'll be sorry. Jack goes upstairs and finds the prince's bedroom. There's a big, huge sword over the bed. He sings out to the giant, who shoves his head in through the window. Jack chops it off. Head rolls in. The giant falls back in the garden. We got it done now, father, thinks Jack. He rushes off to tell the boys the most outrageous story anybody's ever heard. The next morning, when the king sees what's happened, he realizes somebody has saved the princess from the giant. And he sends a decree across the land that the man who has saved the princess from the giant shall have her hand in marriage. Well, now Jack heard nothing about that. He was too busy telling anybody who would listen to him all about killing 3 giants. Many, many, many years later, people started to return to the settlements to build summer homes, even though the king was now offering hundreds of thousands of dollars for people to relocate. Early in the morning, Jack and his mother and father started to go to the place that they still call home. They walked all day, and coming on midnight, they were hungry. Jack didn't buy any grub in the morning, and he wasn't able to get any better with his bow and arrow, so they didn't have any food. Don't worry, said his mother. I still got one of the loaves that I took from the house we left years and years ago. Well, Jack figures if there's not too much green on it, he might choke it down. And it's the most delicious thing he ever tasted. And he starts to feel funny in the head again. And he hears voices. And he looks down through the woods and he sees the castle of the kingdom of the small wood. And there's a huge banner that says, "Free beer for the fellow can tell the most outrageous stories." Jack rushes down through the woods, jumps up, takes center stage and says, "Have I got a story for you? I'll knock your socks off." And he starts to tell about killing 3 giants. And his father says, "Now, Jack, stop that. Every time you eat that bread," Jack was undeterred. And then he said, "I followed the giant to the castle." And that was all his mother could say. Now, Jack, there was no giants, there was no castle, there was no cats. But Jack was undeterred. And then he says, "I convinced the giant to stick his head in through the window, and I chopped it off." The castle went deadly quiet. The king and the queen and the princess looked at each other, and then he looked at Jack. And the princess flew into Jack's arms. And the king ordered a huge feast in honor of the man who had saved the princess from the giant. And Jack found out that he was going to have her hand in marriage. He was beside himself. She was the most beautiful woman in the kingdom. And he couldn't stop telling his mother and father what a great move it was, moving in closer to the king. But Joey certainly knew what he was talking about, didn't he? Well, Jack's mother and father couldn't disagree with him. There was no way Jack was getting the woman back in the hometown where everybody knew him. They danced all night. It came time to go to bed. The princess led Jack up over the stairs. Sitting on the top step, looking like he owned the place, was the cat. Jack reached down and opened one eye and said, "Who's sorry now?" The princess left to prepare for bed, and Jack stood in the center of the room. He was on top of the world. He walked over and he threw open the shutters, looked out on his new-found kingdom. What a story he had for the boys. And then he felt the gentle touch of her hand on his shoulders. And her voice fell upon his ears. "Jack, wake up, boy. That's the last time you're getting any of that bread." Thank you very much. Do you have any stories? Come forward. Keep all them wallets and watch it back after story.
I think I'll do a short one before we get into this. Is that safe? That's safe there? There we go. On we go. Passing by the Newfoundland coast was this huge aircraft carrier, Abraham Lincoln. Oh, the mightiest warship ever built, according to American Tanker. This testament to technology had a size that was just obscene. They noticed the tiniest little blip upon their radar screen. Well, right away a note dispatched to the captain on the bridge. There was a Newfoundland vessel that was in their path, and it would not move a smidge. Well, the captain took the radio. He said, "I'll straighten this one out, and I'll get them to show us some respect. They'll turn their ship about." Attention, Newfoundland vessel. This is the aircraft carrier Abraham Lincoln. Your ship is in our path, so you must change your course 25 degrees north. And then he sneered and kind of laughed. Well, an answer came immediately, as friendly as could be. Good day, my son, how you getting on? Could you repeat that now for me? Well, the captain of this mighty ship was now somewhat perturbed. Yes, sir, I will change my course. That's not what he just heard. Instead, there was some imbecile in the path of their great vessel, the mightiest warship ever built. These Newfoundlanders think they're special? I say again, sir, this is the aircraft carrier Abraham Lincoln. We're over 100,000 tons. We have 5,000 able Marines aboard, and sir, I am not your son. You must change your course immediately. Your ship is in our way, and we have important business in New York. So now, what do you have to say? So again, Skipper Bob from down Raisin Army answered. He said, well, hello. Boy, that sounds like a wicked ship. And New York was on the go. Why don't you fellas just take a break and drop down Raisin Arm for tea? So you go ahead. You change your course. We'll open the hollow for you at 3. But as for our position, boys, I know you're in a pinch, and I would love to help you out there, Skipper, but no, we will not move an inch. Beat red. Beat red doesn't describe that captain's face. He was ready to explode. With over 40 years of commanding troops, he had never been opposed. I demand you change your course, sir. Do not tempt me on this day. We carry enough firepower to blow Newfoundland away. So in perfect Newfoundland sentiment, in a voice that was just calm and true, the captain got his answer, the response that he was due. Well, buddy, see, it goes like this. Newfoundland's a friendly place. We'll figured you boys would drop in for tea, and we'd hear some stories from the States. But as for course correction, well, Skipper, I'll tell you what to do, because, well, we're a lighthouse. So the next move is up to you. So calmer heads prevailed that day on the bright blue sea, and the mighty aircraft carrier Abraham Lincoln dropped in Raisin Arm for tea. True story. I think we'll do this one, finish up with this one. In a town like Raisin Arm, times are often hard, and when people wants to take a break, they loves a game of cards. Poker, crib, or 45, sure, whatever game you choose. My Uncle Clem, he loves to play, but he don't like to lose. And there's not a day when they don't play, sure, as long as they are able. If cards are dealt out in Raisin Arm, my uncle's at the table. Now, one poker night was quite the time. All the bets were getting dear, and Clem, with all the cards he had, he didn't even have a pair. So the lights went out. The game was called. Not your average now convention, but he was happy that he didn't have to play. My uncle's got connections. Well, walking home that summer's eve, just down by Samuel's barn, a stranger there had stopped the rest, so they had a yarn. And it wasn't long, before playing cards was the topic of conversation. It seemed that Clem and the stranger both had the same preoccupation. Let's make a bet, the stranger said, for your soul, your shoes. Look, if you pick red, then you'll win, but if you pick, black, you lose. My uncle's not stunned. He knew that man was the devil, straight from hell, there to try to coax him down to some eternal cell. The average man would drop with fright or faint just dead away, but Uncle Clem, he never flinched one bit. He said, come on then, boy, let's play. So the devil showed him just 3 cards, 2 black ones, and the red. And he leaned in close to my uncle's ear, and he says, what kind of what he said? He said, oh, I'll take that red one, I'll put it down below, to the bottom of the pack. But my uncle didn't trust him. He kind of knew that card was black. He didn't think the devil was trustworthy, and so he took the pack. He said, look, the bottom, the top, even the middle cards are all of them are black. Well, the devil, he took back the cards. He said, Clint, you're off your head. Because the bottom, look, the top and the middle cards, all of them are red. Whoops. The devil's, he had slipped. Kind of, his con game skills were lame. So he and my uncle negotiated one single final game. He said, look, this one's red and this one's black. So your choice now is not too hard. This here. It's the devil's cash or your immortal soul. What color is this last card? And Clem had never seen a game like this before, and this time it wasn't funny. On one hand, if he lost, he's gone, but on the other hand, there's money. He paused before he said a word. He said, it doesn't matter what I choose. And then he leaned in close, right in the devil's ear. He said, I don't like to lose. The devil screamed, spit smoke and fire. His skin turned flaming red. He stretched to over 10 feet tall, and horns grew from his head. He said, you're the first who's beaten me in quite some time, that's true. You Newfoundlanders are tough to crack. I could use a man like you. No, said Clem, that's not for me, tricking people for their souls. No, I'd rather stay right here in Newfoundland. I don't mind the cold. With an anger, the devil paid his bet, and in a puff of smoke, he made his leave. And then Clem just smiled because his clever wife had put that last card up his sleeve. You know, my uncle put that wallet in the trunk. He said folks would never understand, but boys, I tell you, the greatest deed, he drove the devil from Newfoundland. And before he passed, well, he gave me this, the devil's wallet. That's no joke. And you know, every time I'm at the store, that's true, I still can smell the smoke. True story.
Keep your hands on your wallet. On the clock, eh? Janine, I'm sure you have another story for us. Well, you get comfortable.
Why not?
Go ahead. I don't know, Mike, you want that?
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. John Clark, for looking after all our technical and extra needs.
Yes.
Well, this photograph that I took is from Trinity Bay. And it was taken a while back, and I called it Sal's Fence. And the reason was, this was a fence that years ago housed an old horse called Sal. My story encourages you to think about sharing memories. Now, just like this whole week has been about stories, stories and preserving memories come in all kinds of forms. Share photos, share stories, share yours and others, and pass them on, of course. And with my photographs, I like to say, see it, feel it, share it. And the same with stories. So let's keep that in the back of your mind. This is Mary's story. Now, Mary lived in Trinity Bay. She dear loved it there. She had a wonderful childhood. Next to the ocean, her friends with no fear and no restraints. They could play till dark. Go to the ocean and skip their rocks, watch the fish hop out of the water as plentiful as can be as the fishermen go out and fill their boats. And life was great there. But as she got older, she yearned for the city. So, when the time was right, off she went. And she moved to St. John's Town. Now there she had a great life as well. She met her husband, John. They had one son, which they named John. And they had a great life. Well, as they aged, her husband had some health issues and he passed. Now she said to herself, this really makes me think. What do I have to pass on to my son if I were to pass? She looked around her small apartment, and small it was, and she didn't think she had much. Her belongings were small. It bothered her. She thought about it for days, and then it came to her. I know what I'll give my son. She owned a piece of land, a small piece of land down in Trinity Bay, that her parents had given her. A tiny piece of land, not big enough for a house, down by the ocean. This is what I'll give my son, John. And as excited as can be, she called him up, she told him she had to talk to him, and they got together. She explained to him, I want to give you this piece of land when I pass. Well, he thought, well, why would I want that, Mom? You know, my grandparents are gone, and we don't go back there very much anymore. Well, she said, that is my gift to you. Being a grateful son, he said, thank you, Mom. Now she said, I want you to take me out there. Let's go for a drive. Really, Mom? Yes. Okay, so when time allowed, he took his mom. So they took the long drive out to Trinity Bay. Now on that trip, where previous in busy lives, time is precious and very little, they spent some time together. They chatted the whole way and, talked about what was going on in their lives, and it was great. When they got down to the town, she took him on down to the beach. Sure enough, it's a tiny piece of land, not big enough for a house. Well, John, he still shook his head and said, okay, Mom, but I'm not really sure what I'll do with it. But he didn't want to upset her, and it seemed to mean a lot to her, so he said, thanks, Mom. And they headed back to St. John's Town. Well, on his way back, he thought to himself, well, I appreciate the gift, but, when the timing is right, I'll probably sell it. I'll probably let it go. Well, more time passed. And at this point, her health was failing. And she knew in her heart that she didn't have long, and she wanted to get back down to Trinity Bay. So she called up her son. John, let's go back to Trinity Bay one more time. Really, Mom? Yes. I want to go back one more time. Will you take me? Well, of course, Mom. When time allowed, off they went down to Trinity Bay. They had a lovely drive once again and really connected and chatted about a lot of things that they just hadn't come up in past years. Now, when she got coming into the town, she told him so many things, little tidbits about how much she loved where she lived and growing up. Like, for instance, that's the church that me and your dad got married in. And you see that old run-down parking lot? Just scrappy pieces of pavement with no building? That's where I went to school. That's where the schoolhouse was. And we played hopscotch there. Well, Sally was the best player of all, but we never ever told her. Well, on they went. Now, you see that store? Oh, I love that store, old Mrs. Bride's. We would go in there and she would give us a whole bag of glass bottle candy for a nickel. Sure, you could suck on one for a whole day. We loved it, and I loved watching her. They also sold meat, and she had on her counter a long roll of brown paper. And they would get the meat, she'd tie it all up expertly with a white string. She'd put it on the paper, she'd fold it up so expertly, and she'd tie it again and deliver. Oh, I just loved how she'd snap that paper off the roll. I could go there every day. Now, a little ways further, she says, that's where Blackjack lives. Blackjack? Yes, nothing to do with cards or anything. We call him Blackjack because, well, he got into a bit of mischievousness when he was younger. He went to a neighbor's house and they were freshly tarring the roof. They were finished, but the ladder was still up. And he took a dare that he could get up, get to the peak and back without falling. Off he went up the ladder. He just about got to the peak. And down he comes tumbling down, rolling down on the hot, fresh tar. But he wasn't hurt. He fell right into the hay bale. Well, what a mess. Luckily he was okay, well, at least until he got home to his mother. So these were the kinds of things that she just chatted about. Now, they were almost there, and she said, let's go see Millie. Now, her friend Millie, that she dear loved, was still alive, still lived in an old house down in Trinity. Okay. So they pulled in, and the smoke was going up the chimney as it does, even though it's summer. They went in, and Millie was delighted. They had tea, and they chatted, and weren't there very long, and Mary says to her, Millie, we're going down to the beach. You want to come with us? Well, yes, of course. That would be lovely. They all got in the car and headed down. When they got to the beach, they were just there in awe. Two friends holding hands, talking to one another. And John, he was like kind of stood offside and letting them have their moments. But after a time, he kind of got really interested in their stories, and he was listening to the things that they were telling. And it was really interesting. Well, John said, I think I'm starting to get it. I think I know what Mom was giving me. She wasn't giving me a little piece of land, not big enough for a house down by the ocean. She was giving me her memories. And in that moment, he really engaged. They stayed there the whole day. Now it was starting to get a little cool. Millie had poor knees and she was getting cold. So Mary got her sweater and put it around Millie, her friend. Millie, you have my sweater. You could use it. Okay, Millie? That's a lot better. They stayed there and they held hands, sometimes without saying a word. But the seagulls, they were doing their thing, and the ocean was so beautiful. You could hear the ocean and the waves. You could stay there forever. Well, Mary looked at Millie. Hey, Millie, do you remember that fence? Ah, yes. The beach, yes, yes. The memories that we share, and that old fence, it's still there. And old Sal, our old friend, this garden fed him. The sounds that he would make, his steps got quicker when we went near where the grass grew thicker. We knew he felt it. We did too. He didn't like us first, but soon he did. You know, Millie, the fence, the beach, the ocean, I'm filled with emotion. Yes, so am I, but it feels good. Well, they stayed till dark, until the glorious Trinity sunset burnt a hole right through the wires of that fence before they left. And they got in the car and headed off to town, dropped off Millie. Well, Mary took the sweater and she put it in her arms. And she thought, I'm just going to keep it there until I get back. And even though it was keeping her warm, you could tell that she felt Millie's arms around her. And she didn't think that she would be back to Trinity. And she didn't get back to Trinity. But what a gift. Her son spent more time with her. And they relished in those moments and they created more moments. Well, shortly, she passed. And then John, he got back to Trinity Bay as often as he could. And when he made his own family, he brought them back and told their stories and made new stories that they would share for years and years to come. This photo hangs on a wall in his house in St. Johnstown. And just like memories that they created, a photograph as well will create just that trigger to bring the memories to life and tell the stories again. Thank you.
Powerful story. I guess because we're surrounded by so much beauty in this land, we don't see it until it's captured on a picture. And then we actually know how beautiful the place we're living in. Christine, Tennessee. Christine,
Hennebury. Hennebury.
Say it.
Hennebury. Okay, I'll let you right here.
Thanks so much, Aiden Payne. So before I tell my next story, I do want to tell you something about the story I told previously. Whether or not I believe that I've gotten the message directly from my dad, I did literally pull those 3 cards last Halloween. And when I went to write the story for another show that I actually did on this stage in January, when I went to pull the story together, I had to scroll back through my Facebook messages because I had forgotten, I knew that what messages I received, but I'd forgotten what cards they were attached to. And I had to scroll back through my messages from my sister Denise. And what I ended up doing was searching for God's sake. Because I was looking, because I knew I said, look what I just heard from Pete, for God's sake. And then explained to her. So anyhow, I just thought you might like the little addendum to the story. So the second story that I'm going to tell is a ghostly story. In the festival last year, we had Colin Irwin, a storyteller from Ireland here. Yes, Northern Ireland. And I was lucky enough in his workshop to be paired with Gary Green and Karen Carroll. And we had to bring ideas to put a story together. So the 3 of us wove this story. And this is the first time I've told it to an audience, aside from the little bit that we did that day. And so you may hear this story again from one of them with their own spin on it, but here's mine. About 100 years ago, there was a young fisherman who was having some troubles. He was, the catch wasn't great. He was having bad luck with all his gear. Things kept going wrong, and he was actually worrying about whether he could provide for his family. Now his wife, who loved him very, very much, and his son, who loved him very, very much, were happy, except they were worried about where their next meal might be coming from, whether they'd have enough to eat. And the wife thought that she had maybe come up with a solution. She was going to take her son and go back and live with her family for a little while. She wasn't leaving him. She was just giving him a break from the stress of having to make sure they had enough for everybody, but he just had to have enough for him rather. But of course he took this very badly because he knew that he had married above his station. And that if his wife took their son and went back to stay with her parents for a couple of weeks, her father would drive a wedge between them, and over time, they would become more and more distant, and he would never have his wife and son back again. And so he was very stressed about this. And he was tossing and turning in bed one night, and then he came up with a solution. He was going to give up his life as a fisherman, even though his father had fished before him, had given him, had, you know, handed down his boat when he had died suddenly years before. And he was going to give all that up. In fact, he was going to burn a lot of it. And he was going to go and work in one of the places his father-in-law had recommended. It sounded soul-sucking, but he was going to do it. So he actually got up out of bed late that night and went down to the beach. And he set a big bonfire, planning to drag all his gear over and throw it in there. But it took some nerve. He was working up his nerve. And when he stood up, he did that thing, slapped on his knees and stood up. And when he did, he saw that across from him, through the fire, there was a man there, a shadowed man. And all he could see was like the fire reflecting in the man's eyes. And the man said, "You're just about ready to give up, are you?" He said, yeah, I am. He said, "What about if I told you that I could give you 13 years of prosperity from this day?" And the fisherman said, "Well, I doubt that you could do it." And the man said, "Well, I've done it before and I can do it again. What do you have to lose from getting into an agreement with me?" And, you know, the fisherman was so desperate. He said, You're right. Sure. What do I need to do to give you, to have 13 years of prosperity?" And the shadowed man said, "You have to give me your soul." And this is when the fisherman was like, "Okay, sure, yes. I'm out in the dark and the shadowed man is sitting across from the fire at me, as if this day wasn't already bad enough. Yes, sure, fine. In 13 years, you can have my soul. Bring me the prosperity. Just have it start first thing in the morning." And the shadowed man said, "It's done." And the fire started to burn down really, really quickly. And the shadowed man reached into the fire and pulled out a burnt stick. And he handed that over to the fisherman. He said, "All you have to do is point this stick at whatever situation you need fixed, and it will get fixed." So the fisherman says, "Okay, great, thanks." And then the fire burns out. And he walks back, he climbs back in bed with his wife without having burnt anything except wood. And he goes to sleep. He wakes up with the dirty, burnt stick still in his hand. He's left a bit of a smudge on the sheets, but he explained that to his wife later. So he goes down to his boat, and he decides, he goes out on the water, and he said, "Well, what have I got to lose?" So he points his stick at the water and says, "Let's fill her up." And sure enough, before he even realized it, he had caught everything he needed to catch for the day. And that continued on and on. Not only did he catch a lot of fish, but every situation seemed to turn his way. All he had to do was point that stick at it. And he didn't just keep this prosperity for his family. He actually lifted the whole community up. He shared everything he had. He and his wife and their multiple kids over years became just such integrated parts of the community. Everybody was prospering because he was prospering. And time passed, as time does. It passed way too fast, and he realized one day that he was getting close to his 13 years, and that the shadowed man had come in with his side of the deal, and perhaps he was actually going to have to surrender his soul. He began to feel it in his chest, like a quickening, that something was happening. And as it got to about this time of year, he got up one morning and realized that this was the day. So he spent his day talking to his friends, talking to his family, saying his goodbyes without ever actually saying goodbye. And as it got dark, he walked down towards the beach. He could see in the distance a fire was already lit, and there was somebody there by it. But as he walked along the beach, a strange fog rolled in, and as it got close, that fog turned into the shape of a man. In fact, it turned into the shape of his father. And his father said to him in a voice that came from very far away, "Don't make the same mistake I did. You do not have to surrender your soul. You just have to name the beast. You have to call him by his true name, and you can be freed from your contract." Now, our fisherman friend was a bit shocked by this, But then his father told him the beast's name. And I know what it is, but I'm not going to tell it to you because I know that to use something's true name can be to call it to you. And I would like to keep all of you and myself safe this evening. So with that, his father's ghost dissipated and he strode towards that fire, now filled with bravery. He had never realized what his father had sacrificed for his success, for his father's success, and what he was going to have to sacrifice for his own until his father had come along. So he went right up to the fire. He stood on the other side and he looked at the shadowed man who had the fire reflecting in his eyes. And as the shadowed man opened his mouth to speak, to claim the fisherman's soul, the fisherman said, "Our deal is void. I owe you nothing." And then he called the shadowed man by his name. And as sure as anything, that shadowed man instantly disappeared. And the fire went out. And I don't know what happened to the shadowed man, where he ended up. But I do know that our fisherman friend and his family and everyone in the community lived happily ever after that. Thank you.
Wonderful story. Very appropriate coming on Halloween. Wonderful story. Well, we're just about finished, and I'll do a quick story to wrap it up. But I just wanted to thank the committees, the people on the board of directors, and on all the committees for their volunteering their time and making this such a great festival, and especially to Karen Carroll, who worked so hard all year. And this is the result of her hard work, along with other people. I'll tell you this story now. My father told me this story, and I suppose when your father tells you a story, you got to think it's true. But I think this one got a chance of being true. Years ago, an old fella butchered a cow coming on winter. He cooked it up and he preserved some, and he gave some away, and he ate some, and he was left with one small piece left over. Now, it was a bit grey around the edges, but they didn't throw anything out in those days. And he said to his wife, he said, "Mother, I'm going to give this to Uncle John next door." So he saw him out chopping up wood. He said, "Uncle John, here's a feed for you now. You cook this up in the next few days and that'll be perfect." Uncle John took the feed. He never said thank you or kissed me arse or nothing. Off he goes. 3 or 4 days went by and he never heard a word. Now Uncle John was the kind of a fellow, if you gave him a feed that didn't taste very good, he wouldn't be long telling you about it. So he saw him out chopping up wood again. He said, "Uncle John, did you ever cook up that feed that I gave you?" "Oh yes." "Oh yes," says Uncle John. "Mother cooked that for supper on Sunday." "Well, that's pretty good. You got a feed out anyway." "No, but no. We couldn't eat it on Sunday." "Couldn't eat it?" "No." So she heated it up for supper Monday evening. "Well, that's pretty good. It took a couple of days, but at least you got a feed out of it." "No, but no. We couldn't eat it on Monday. Couldn't eat it on Monday, but no." So on Tuesday, she threw it out to the dogs. Threw it out to the dogs, did she? But at least somebody in the family got a feed out of it anyway. I suppose the dogs ate it, did they, boy? "Oh yes. Oh yes," says Uncle John. "The dogs ate it, but they're licking their arse ever since." Licking their arse? What the hell are the dogs licking their arse for? "Well, I don't rightly know," says Uncle John, "but I think they're trying to get the taste out of their mouth." Thank you very much.
Oh my, Randy Crane. Who needs to son? Who needs to? Yeah, true story. Anyway, so won't keep you too much longer. I just wanted to say thank you. It wasn't just me who did all this work, believe me, it was far more than me. So thank you to our board, our programming committee. Thank you to our volunteers. Arlene is here tonight. Catherine is here tonight. Catherine Wright, who put together all of our school storytelling, and who's always there, to refer to and call back to for sure, for any particular purpose. Elaine Roy, God help me. Elaine Pond is our fabulous administrator, And Elaine, it just keeps us going in so many ways. You can't even imagine how much Elaine does for this organization. It truly is a gift that fell from heaven, and that's a true story that I'm not going to get into right now. Thank you, of course, to our partners, AC Hunter Library, the rooms. This is our first time being at the Cox and Palmer space at the LSPU Hall, and they have been so fantastic. We are so, so grateful to them. Cupid's Legacy Center, and I want to say to everybody, even though it's not going to be a great day tomorrow, we are still going to do our event at Cupid's Legacy Center, but we will be inside out of the weather. So just for anybody who's thinking of coming, or maybe thinking they wouldn't go because of the weather, we are going to be there. And so thank you to all our partners. The Battery Cafe, which hosts our monthly story circle, and they never charge us anything, and they give us a really lovely service, and we're very, very grateful to the Battery Cafe for that. PhoneMed, who sponsored our opening night, you know, kind of hors d'oeuvres that we had for the opening night. All of our partners, all of our sponsors, all of our funders, because without money you can do nothing as an arts organization. So the City of St. John's, Canada Council for the Arts, Canadian Heritage, which is what BCAH really talks about, the Government of Newfoundland, which is the CEDP program, and of course Arts NL. So thank you, and especially to our audiences, because storytellers, I mean, it's no fun to talk to yourself and tell a story. I do it all the time because that's how I practice. But you know, you need an audience in order to really, really be fulfilled as a storyteller. And all our audiences have been so beautiful and excellent this week. Thank you for that. We so appreciate it. So please stay home, and I want to say to everybody that, you know, everybody has their stories, and the important part of it, as many of our tellers said tonight, is to share your stories, because that is how we actually create new storytellers, is to share our stories. And when people get enthusiastic about storytelling, as obviously all of us did, as all of us became as storytellers, that's when the real kind of spark of storytelling starts. And that's when it gets passed on to other storytellers. So thank you so much. We so appreciate your support. And we'll see you next year. Hope you can come back again.